Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about moon phase gardening. So my family and I started our homesteading journey probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And before that, we had absolutely no experience with gardening, growing food, preserving food at all. We didn't come from farmer families. We didn't come from a background where this information was passed on. And so one of the main goals at our homestead is to constantly evolve our understanding, add in new skills, and try to learn something new every year. And one of the things that we added in last year was starting to embrace the concept of planting our seeds with the phases of the moon. Now, this is kind of an old practice that's become new again, and there's a lot of reasons for this. When you work with the phases of the moon, you have a healthier and more productive garden. Have you ever planted beets before and you end up with these big, beautiful, juicy green leaves and the actual beetroot is small and kind of shriveled and you're like, what did I do wrong? This is the video for you because it will help you to understand how the moon phases affect gardening. What is also really nice about this is you're starting to work with the cycles of nature and understanding its rhythms on a deeper level. And now this is not the same, I want to preface, this is not the same as gardening by astrological dates, where Saturn is in the sky and that kind of thing. That is a skill that I hope to learn soon and will share with you when I'm ready. So moon phase gardening is all about water. So we all know that the gravitational pull of the moon affects the tides on this planet and causes them to rise and fall during certain phases of the moon. Take that knowledge and then translate it into water levels in soil. So the moon phases are also going to affect when water is brought to the surface of the soil and when it kind of draws it down further, deeper where the roots are. So therefore, during particular phases, for example, during the waxing phases of the moon, there's more water being pulled to the surface of the soil. And so the seeds are able to swell. You're going to have higher germination rates, and therefore you're going to have stronger plants. And that's exactly what we're going for when we talk about moon phase gardening. So if you're new to moon phases, I'll break it down for you the best that I can. There are basically two chunks of time that you want to think about in terms of moon phases. One is the waxing phase of the moon. And this is when the moon appears to be getting bigger in size. So this is from when we're at the new moon phase, moving towards the full moon phase. The next would be the waning phase of the moon. So this starts just after the full moon, and it appears that the moon is getting smaller in the sky as it moves towards the new moon phase. So these are the two kind of things you want to keep in mind when you're talking about when to plant certain seeds. So we understand how the moon affects the water. Cool, we've got that covered. Now I want you to consider another term, and that's geotropism, because this also has a lot to do with gravity and how it works. So geotropism is how plants grow in response to the gravitational pull of the planet. So for example, root vegetables, potatoes, garlic, onions, beets, carrots, they all grow in the same direction as the gravitational pull of the planet. Whereas your aerial plants, your tomatoes, your peppers, your eggplants, your basil, your calendula flowers, they all are, in a sense, anti-gravitational. They are moving and growing in the opposite direction of gravity. Okay, so we've talked about water and we've talked about gravity. What's cool about moon phase gardening is it takes both of these things into consideration. That's great, but how does this translate into when I plant my seeds? So all of your annual flowers, so this would be like, your marigolds, your calendulas, what else? We planted painted daisies this year. There were a few that are annual plants, okay? Your annual flowers, your vegetables, and your fruit that all bear products that are above the ground, you want to plant during the waxing phase of the moon. So this means you want to start them anytime in and around just after the new moon, planting up until the full moon. Any of your crops that produce fruit or vegetables below the ground. So this is your beets, your carrots, your parsnips, your onions, your biennial and perennial flowers, and any of your flowering bulbs, you want to plant during the waning phase of the moon. So this starts from just after the full moon until the new moon. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you my seed starting chart in my bullet journal so you can have an idea of how I keep all of this information organized for an efficient seed starting system. All right, and welcome to my bullet journal spread on our seed starting calendar for the year. If you haven't seen my video on my bullet journal system, which is the system I use to stay organized, stay on top of things, and not go completely insane, I'll link that up in the corner here. It really is a lifesaver for me. And one of the reasons I like it is because I can do cool things like this. I can have all of my seed starting calendar in here, as well as my homeschool schedule and everything else. So I'll walk you through it. I'll show you how I organize things. You, of course, can do things the way that work for you, but I do recommend having some kind of seed starting schedule. It's just going to make your life easier than having to rely on your memory. I do also recommend having a legend of some kind. Again, it just makes the translation of all of this a bit easier. So a dot in mine is starting your seeds indoors. A dashed line is when we would direct sow certain seeds outside. We do a combination of both here on our homestead. The upwards arrow is when I will transplant certain crops. The open circle is the new moon, and the filled in circle is the full moon. So over here, I did a list of all the crops that we are going to grow this year, and my OCD brain refuses to make me do this over again, even though I had to add some things in the bottom that weren't in alphabetical order. So here we are. And then along the top here, I have all of the new and full moons for each month starting from February to June, because certain seeds, we're actually going to be starting our onions pretty soon. So as I talked about in the previous segments, things like broccoli that grow above the ground, I'm going to want to start my seeds for broccoli inside either on or just after the new moon, which is on March 13th. And you can find these dates online fairly easily. So to me, this is an excellent way to kind of have an at-glance look at what I need to start inside during mid-March. What do I have to start, outside in terms of when certain seeds will go out? For example, our sweet potato slips, it's interesting. I want to do a little bit more reading about this. The sweet potatoes grow below the ground, but the slips grow above the ground. So I'm going to be planting them based on the full moon cycle, so the waning part of the moon. But if you've grown sweet potatoes before and you follow moon phases, please let me know how you organize things. So like I said, I hope you find a little sneak peek into my bullet journal system helpful. I do recommend having some kind of seed starting calendar, and I'll post some links below I also use something called Clyde's Garden Planner. Let me see, I might actually have it really close right here. Yep, here it is. And you can actually find this online. And we love this little sucker, so I'll post a link below. And it allows you to know based on your last average frost date. So we're kind of in and around this area where we are, and it'll tell you when to start your seeds inside, when to transplant, and all of that. And this is just a couple of bucks online. So I highly recommend this one as well. So I hope you found this information interesting. I know that last year was probably one of our most productive gardens ever, despite all of the pest pressures we've had. And don't worry, if we have them this year, I will film lots of videos on companion planting and how to deal with pests. But I can say that we had an incredibly productive garden, and I think it had a lot to do with working with the phases of the moon. If you have any questions or comments about this, experiences that you would like to share, please leave them below. And until next time, this is Correne from Spirea Herbs, wishing you health and wellness.